Thank you, James and UKRIO for inviting us to present. Very pleased to be here and very interested to hear everyone's questions and thoughts, and very cool to see where everyone's joining from today as well. So as James said, my name's Areeq. I'm Head of Policy for Data and Digital Technologies at the Royal Society, which is the UK's National Academy for Science. And my background over the past 10 years or so has been thinking about how technology is affecting society and thinking about the sort of policy changes that can be made to alleviate some potential harms and to exploit the opportunities that new technologies present. And AI is something I've been thinking about for a long time. Before I joined the Royal Society, the most interesting project I've done, and probably still to this date, the most impactful piece of work I've done, was this back in 2019, which was to produce deepfakes of Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, who were the leaders of the Conservative and Labour Party at the time, because you weren't aware, endorsing each other to be Prime Minister and then warning society about the oncoming wave of AI-generated disinformation and AI-generated content. And that was 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago now. And even I'm shocked at how quickly things have developed in that time. Like producing these was difficult, but not super difficult. But I don't think anyone was really expecting it to become so easy to produce AI generated content within the space of a few years and for free, essentially. While it doesn't really look like these videos, the sort of content that's being produced has really affected every aspect of society beyond just the sort of political arena. But about the Royal Society, in case you're not aware, we are the oldest scientific institution in the world, around 360 years old. And our mission is to promote science for the benefit of humanity. And we do this in lots of different ways. So we give out grants to researchers, we have a publishing arm, we do science diplomacy, we do industry engagement, we do public and schools engagement. And then we also have a directorate called Science Policy, which is the department I sit in, which essentially operates like a think tank within the organization, producing reports, recommendations, analysis on issues related to science and society, and then trying to influence decision makers to implement those recommendations. And there are a few different teams. There are ones that work on education, there are ones that work on research and innovation, climate change, but the team I run focuses on data and digital technologies, and within that, artificial intelligence. Today I want to talk to you about a recent report we published, which was in May, called Science in the Age of AI, How Artificial Intelligence is Changing the Nature and Method of Scientific Research. And going to give you an overview of what was covered in the report, what we did, what it said about research integrity, and then I'll open it up to some Q&A. And this is our wonderful team, the Data and Digital Tech team who works on this report. Here on screen is just some examples of the kinds of work we produce. So there are two types, essentially. The ones that are colorful here, these are the sort of major reports we do. These are quite lengthy documents, almost like reference documents, typically like 100 pages long. And then the other plainer documents here are kind of one-off briefing style papers, sort of 5 to 6 pages on specific issues. So here you can see at the bottom is the Science in the Age of AI reports. On the right, the online information environment looked at disinformation and AI generated disinformation. And then some of these shorter papers in the bottom right, I'll talk about this one later. But it's about red teaming large language models for scientific disinformation and the sort of efficacy of that kind of approach to building guardrails into these systems. So this is the reports, which I'm going to cover. All of our work is led by our fellows. Oh, pretty big omission. We're also a fellowship of the world's leading scientists. So historically, these would be people like Charles Darwin, Isaac Newton, modern era, Geoffrey Hinton, one of the godfathers of AI, who yesterday was awarded the Nobel Prize for physics for his work on AI, is also a fellow of the Royal Society. So we work with our fellowship a lot on our policy work, and they're generally chaired by a fellow. So this project was chaired by Professor Alison Noble, who has an AI background, works in sort of uh, AI for imaging, and she's also the vice president and foreign secretary of the Royal Society. And with her, we had an expert steering group, some of which you can see named on screen, covering lots of different areas from sort of computer science, industry, policy, and ethics as well. And here are the chapters that are covered in our reports. So we look at broadly how AI is transforming scientific research. We focus on research integrity. We look at the sort of skills gaps and the importance of interdisciplinarity, which is this idea that computer scientists and AI developers should work with expert scientists on developing tools and not work in silos. And whilst that sounds obvious, it's obviously it's not the case in practice that you're having this kind of cross-disciplinary working, or at least not enough at the moment. And then finally, we look at the role of the private sector, which is significant in this space and quite a novel aspect of the use of AI. Sorry, quite a novel aspect on the impact on scientific research that's happened with AI. And then finally, we look at AI safety and ethics, which in the UK certainly has been a huge topic in the past 6 months or so, particularly under the previous Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And then also we have a few case studies of how AI is changing scientific research and material science, climate science, and rare disease research. Here's what we did. So series of roundtables, series of workshops looking at different aspects of the impact of AI. At one point, we looked at the metaverse because that was a big issue back then. But overall, we engaged with more than 100 leading scientists throughout this work from all over the world. And they range from fields as diverse as astrophysics to paleontology. So we've got a really good, diverse set of views on how AI is changing their fields. And we've also commissioned 3 studies which are available on our website, which are published separately, which is a taxonomy of AI technologies for scientific research, a patent landscape of what kinds of tools are being patented and where, and that gives a kind of good indication of growth in this field, and also a good indication of the sort of regions that are leading in the space. So we focused on 3 broad areas of action in our report. So this is to enhance access to essential AI infrastructures and tools, to build trust in the quality of AI-based scientific outputs, and finally to ensure their safe and ethical use in research. And our specific recommendations are here. So number 1, that AI governments, research funders, and AI developers should improve access. They should prioritize accessibility and usability of these tools. So it's not enough simply to just produce something and expect people to use it. You actually have to make them user friendly, and think of what's interesting about ChatGPT isn't that it was necessarily new or unexpected, but it was so user friendly. And I think this is a core aspect to promoting AI across scientific research, is that you can't expect people to have the skills up front. They may have the expertise in that area, but they won't have the skills in AI. Third and fourth was to focus on open science principles, which the Royal Society is a big champion of, but also there's a lot of work internationally from UNESCO and others about promoting open science. And this really is actually the core aspect of the scientific method, which is this idea that you can scrutinize other people's work, understand what they did, how they did it, and to reproduce their experiments. And I'll cover this again in a bit more detail shortly. And then finally is a recommendation for the scientific communities themselves to be involved in building these AI tools and overseeing their ethical use, which goes back to this idea of red teaming. So you could have Meta or Google or whoever create a product and use their own knowledge or their own networks to consider what the potential risks might be. So, someone might use an LLM to create a bioweapon or some sort of toxin, or use it to promote COVID misinformation. But there'll be loads of specific niche uh, expert ways that you could use these tools that might be beyond the understanding of the developers themselves. So we do need the scientific communities to be involved in actually building the safeguards in these tools themselves. And here are the key findings from all the research activities we did. One, AI is being used across all STEM fields. Obviously, heavy use in computer science and biology. Secondly, that data, again, some of this may seem obvious to a very expert audience that we have today, but data is the foundation of AI applications, and where I think where I think some of the hype or interest in AI is valid is around its applications on sort of narrow, high quality data sets. So think about sort of cancer imaging or X-rays, very you have lots of them, well labeled, quite consistent data. Where it's less or where it's more challenging is around the sort of general applications where it's trained on sort of everything on the internet, which may be good quality, maybe bad quality, or you might just not know what's in there, or it might be changing constantly over time. Third, few key regions dominating: China, US, Japan, South Korea. Perhaps not that surprising. And again, the companies that are dominating, Alphabet, which is Google's parent company, Siemens, IBM, and Samsung. In terms of the issues, the sort of black box nature of AI, which is this idea that you can't understand how these tools are coming to their conclusions or how they are finding patterns, is an issue, but also the proprietary nature of these tools, the fact that they are owned by private companies and research is conducted behind closed doors in these companies, is also a potential issue and quite a novel aspect here, which makes it harder to test and reproduce experiments. Finally, as I mentioned, about interdisciplinarity, and then the promise that we highlight in the report is around expediting routine tasks. My characterization of the report is that it's quite sober analysis. It's not leaning into the hype, but it's also not sort of doom and gloom view on AI. So here's how broadly AI could be used. Sorry, there's something wrong with my screen. So this is broadly how AI can be used to change scientific research. And this is a reproduction of a model in this paper on the right by Kren. And you get these three areas here. So at the top, you've got advancing simulations and data representation. So this could be things like a digital twin, or it could be creating sort of synthetic data to train new models. On the left here, you've got the identification of new patterns or new relationships in data, and also as a sort of tool for inspiration and brainstorming. So you might use these tools to do literature reviews. You might use them to, you use them as an assistant to like consider experiment design. You could be using them in a sort of you know a, an expert advisor essentially. And on the right hand side here, you've got this sort of new understanding that the thing that's making people quite excited about AI is this idea that you can make new discoveries and new understandings, but also to rapidly train up people in new fields. So you could actually use AI to bridge that interdisciplinary gap by training people or creating a consistent language between fields. Here is an overview of the sort of patent filing trends. I would say big caveat on this is that it's very difficult actually to do this kind of analysis, and we realized this as we did it. One is there are lots of gaps in data where patents are filed. lots of inconsistencies in where they're filed, and also lots of different reasons for filing. So it doesn't necessarily tell you um, that, patents don't necessarily equal interesting innovation. They just equal something new. So that's the caveat. But what you can see is a very clear trend that there's a lot of patents being filed in relation to AI over the past 5 or 6 years or so. Here again, with the same caveats, you can see a bit of the geographical distribution of AI in life sciences. So here on the left is the sort of global distribution. Again, perhaps unsurprising that the US is dominating. And on the right-hand side, you can see within Europe, the UK is not doing bad, but it's just behind Germany and ahead of France. So here's a quote about from one of our roundtable participants about the challenge of the reproducibility crisis, which is this idea that you can't reproduce experiments conducted by AI, and that undermining the integrity of scientific results. So it's hardly possible to imagine higher stakes than these for the world of science. The future existence and social role of science seem to hinge on the ability of researchers and scientific institutions to respond to the reproducibility crisis, thus averting a complete loss of trust in scientific expertise by civil society. And this is the key challenge, I think, with AI. So it's not that AI isn't interesting or exciting or impressive, but it's that it needs to be reliable if it's to be applied in real world scenarios. So if you wanted to use an AI tool to do cancer diagnosis or to create autonomous vehicles or whatever else it might be, you might have an extremely high uh, need when it comes to the reliability or extremely low risk appetite. So the current models you have, let's assume it's sort of 60% accurate if you ask ChatGPT to do something or some sort of question, which is that could be impressive versus a sort of lay expert, but not good enough to use in a real world scenario. It could be 80% accurate and still not good enough. It could even be 99% accurate and still not reliable enough to use it in a real world scenario. And to take an extreme example, if you automated, let's say, the process for executions in the United States, so you automate, who should be executed, and automate the process of execution. Again, extreme example. 99 out of 100 times being accurate would not be good enough to be applied. So the key challenge here is reliability. And the way we understand reliability in scientific research is through reproducibility and through testing and through experimentation, which is difficult because these are proprietary tools and they're hard to understand, etc., etc. And again, in the report, I won't read this out, but in the report, it goes through in specific detail what the challenges are around explainability and interpretability and different approaches to solving that problem. And here again, you can see a sort of list the barriers to reproducibility. Part of that is skills training, part of that is incentives. So you could imagine a scenario where um, rather than just publishing your paper, you also have to publish the data, or you have to publish the sort of specifications of the tool that you used, or even make the tools available that you used online. Difficulty with that is there is no current incentives or not enough incentive to actually do that. It's all about publishing in the best journals at speed and publishing something new. It's not necessarily publishing sort of failed attempts or publishing on data. You don't get the same kind of credit. And equally, there are challenges around publishing in relevant journals. So if you're a computer scientist, or maybe you want to be a leading computer scientist, there'll be certain journals that you will want to publish in, and you might not get the same sort of recognition if you publish in a biology journal or whatever else it might be. But for for proper scrutiny, you might want to be publishing it in these other journals. So there's a question there of maybe how you actually incentivize this kind of interdisciplinary working in a sort of career progression way. Quick on AI safety. So this really emerged out of some of the warnings by Geoffrey Hinton and others around AI presenting an existential risk to society, and the general butchered version of the hypothesis is that AI will eventually reach. So society will eventually develop artificial general intelligence, which is this idea that AI is as intelligent, or if not more intelligent, than human beings at all tasks. And there are companies working towards that goal, such as OpenAI, like they're openly stating they want to create artificial general intelligence. And then the theory is once it reaches that stage, this new AGI could create other AI scientists to make it better, and then it'll advance at an exponential rate, take over the world, threat to humanity, etc. So there's been huge debate about whether that's a real legitimate threat, but it's caused a lot of interest and concern about how you might prepare society for something like that. So we've done a lot of work at the Royal Society on AI safety, and at the top left you can see the former Prime Minister uh, came to our building a few days before the AI Safety Summit last year to announce the creation of the AI Safety Institute, which is dedicated to trying to solve this problem. As part of this, we did a red teaming exercise, which was to get climate and infectious disease experts to try and break the guardrails of Llama 2 to produce scientific disinformation on climate change and COVID. We published a paper on this, and you can read more about it in this Time article on the left, Scientists Breaking AI to Make It Safer. Again, sort of summary of this is that, yes, it's very important to get scientists involved in developing guardrails. Big challenges are just the sort of broad range of scientific fields, and even within those fields, the broad range of areas that could be subject to disinformation. It's actually very, very difficult, even if you get scientists involved, to predict everything. And in our work on the online information environment, one conclusion of that was for things like COVID, where you have an authority like the World Health Organization or some other medical body, you can make some judgment on what is, true and false. But in other areas that are emerging, so like 5G misinformation, for example, there's no clear authority. And if there was an emerging disinformation threat when it comes to scientific research, would it actually be possible to do a red teaming exercise like this to produce guardrails on an AI system which might produce scientific disinformation and undermine trust in sort of medical advice or emergency advice? I'm going to whiz through this. So big aspect of the report was on open science, which we've been working with UNESCO on. I just recommend looking at the article on the right, which gave a summary of an event we held with UNESCO on this topic. An interesting debate here on open science and AI is there's a debate. It's generally accepted that open science is a good thing. The question is, how open should these models be? And here you can see a reproduction of a gradient of system access created by Hugging Face. And on the left here, you can see the sort of fully closed system, the sort of very proprietary models where you might have lots of controls over who gets access and etc., but low levels of assurance of external scrutiny. And on the right hand side, fully open, subject to large amounts of scrutiny. But the risk here is bad actors who may be looking at these systems, using them, and not really feeding in a sort of community well-being mindset. So there's quite a big debate with AI, given that it can be used for all sorts of applications, toxins, etc., that open science might not be a good thing. So it's quite an interesting debate. We'll do this. Researcher access to data are really important. I can see I'm running out of time. And finally, leave you with this quote, which is that everybody wants this came from our session, on researcher access to data at the US National Academy of Science in DC. Everybody wants a sparkly fountain, but very few people are thinking of the boring plumbing system underneath it. And that is essentially what the big challenge with AI is that we're speeding ahead without even thinking about the infrastructure that underpins it, thinking about the ethics, thinking about the training, thinking about the incentives, thinking about the quality of data. And again, I will stop there and take some questions, but thank you very much, James, for inviting me to share this.
No, thank you very much. That was fascinating. And my colleague Mo, he's been sharing some links to in the chat to some of the resources that you mentioned. It's a really informative rundown of the benefits AI can offer us, but also the perils. And I think your quote at the end about the sparkly fountain when no one's interested in the plumbing is very, very apt. And also, I know the report is about AI in terms of scientific research and science, but speaking as someone from the humanities, I've had an awful lot of it relevant as well. So thank you. Okay, we've got time for a few quick questions. One was from Karen, who said, there are sort of inequalities in AI, there's an inequality of access to AI emerging across all universities. How can we work together as a sector to ensure that all researchers and future researchers can access basic tools such as generative AI equally?
It's a great question. And again, feeds into this sort of open science question. And so kind of best case scenario, you make these tools all open access. Again, huge caveats over the challenges. There's still lots of debates around whether that's safe for society. But beyond that, there needs to be sort of training. It should be seen as quite an important aspect of the sort of modern scientific researchers' capability to be able to use these tools. And there needs to be much more incentivization for sharing, not just sort of the tools or the data, but also access to compute infrastructure. So at the moment, there's big debate about whether we need to be building more supercomputers or whether it's okay to be using sort of Amazon cloud services, etc. So I think a lot of these questions need to be solved before we can make sure that everyone across the UK, but also around the world, the global south, etc., that there are if very few, if any, actually high performance computing infrastructure in Africa, for example. So there's a lot of work to be done on infrastructure as well.
Yes, and also big questions on the whole sustainability aspects of AI, from energy consumption through using people on low incomes to help train the models and that sort of thing. Two quite related questions. Kate asks, do you think it's through red teaming exercise or other means it's possible to create a kind of perfect set of guardrails for AI, or will they always be fallible to manipulation in some way? And Helen asked if you're working with or planning to work with AI providers on their sort of terms and conditions and capabilities in terms of safeguarding.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I think a good parallel to look at is what happened with disinformation on social media. And the reason we know, or the reason we knew that disinformation was a problem on social media is that independent researchers had access to their data. So like, they understood what was happening on Twitter, who was producing, uh, malicious content, who was spreading it, etc. And what we've seen since the sort of growth of ChatGPT, etc., is every company putting up barriers to access to their data or monetizing it because they know now that they're sitting on gold mines of data. So I think a big challenge we could do red teaming is a retrospective action, and like I said, it's useful and interesting, but realistically, it's going to be very difficult to scale. You have to do this in lots of every language in the world essentially as well. A better way, and something we touched upon in the report is having access to these platforms and understanding like how they're being trained, what they're being trained on, what the potential vulnerabilities might be before they are released to the public. You know, over the past few years, we haven't really seen a lot of the sort of ethical approaches to the release of these models undertaken, but now it's been done. The focus has to be on training, understanding. Red teaming is part of that, but it's not going to be perfect at all.
That's really useful to know. I think that focus on a greater focus on ethics and training is very welcome. I'm sure there's all stuff we can do on this regard. Areeq, thank you so much for your talk today. It's been fascinating and the discussion's been really interesting.